Hey y'all, I have been very bad with videos for the last couple of weeks, but I promise things are gonna get back to normal. I've had a hectic couple of weeks with getting the puppies. We've had John's parents in town. I have friends coming in town this weekend as well. I feel like I've just had so much going on and I haven't been able to focus on YouTube at all, but I'm back, bitches. I shouldn't say that word. I'm gonna get demonetized, but I'm gonna keep it in. Because I hate not being able to swear. It is the most irritating thing in the entire world. Also, if you see my leggings, they're covered in powder from doing my makeup, so we're just going to ignore that. I hate not being able to swear. I feel like it's taking away half my personality. My personality is just me swearing like a trucker. So I hate that I have to tone it back. It's very annoying, but that's not what this video is about. I actually found this book that's full of 911, supernatural 911 phone calls. And I really want to read out of it. I haven't read any of the stories yet, but I've been dying to read it. I found this book like 2 weeks ago. And I have been itching to film a video on it. I cannot wait to get into this book. I talked about this like a couple videos ago, but I'm not going to be reading out of the police ghost stories anymore. The stories just aren't very good. They're not very entertaining. So we're Xing that book and we're going to go to supernatural 911 phone calls and we're going to see if you guys like this more. If it's not good, then we won't make another video on it. But I am going to read from it because I've been dying to read. We're going to get started because I feel like I've been talking for 7 years. This first story says, The Silent Officer. I heard this story from one of my young junior officers. She came into work one day looking unsettled about something, and when I asked her if anything was wrong, she confided in me about a strange experience she'd had a few days before. It was late by the time she had finished her shift. The clock on the wall read a little past 2 in the morning, and the station was quiet. Most of the other officers on her shift had already clocked out, and as she walked past the admin offices on her way to the locker room, she noticed it was empty inside. One of the desk lamps was flickering faintly in the corner, but she left it on for the sallow yellow glow it emitted into the corridor. The station could get eerily dark at night, with shadows seeming thicker and more abundant than normal. As she neared the end of the hallway, she began to hear footsteps echoing faintly behind her. She paused, wondering if she was imagining it. Amidst the silence, there was the distant clatter of shoes against lino. I don't know what lino is, I don't even know if I'm saying that correctly, echoing down the hallway towards her. The sound seemed displaced, she told me, as though it didn't quite belong. Curious, she turned around, half expecting to see another officer behind her, but there was nobody else there. Also, okay, I'm gonna say this really quickly. I thought this was about 911 calls. Maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, supernatural 911 calls. So maybe this is just, I don't know. We're gonna go along with it. The air in the corridor was colder than usual, and she could feel a slight chill creeping along her arms and neck. She got a distinct feeling that she wasn't alone. Shrugging it off, she was about to keep going when she heard something else. A quiet mutter, or a whisper, alighting the air behind her. She froze, wondering if someone else was on the same floor. Driven by curiosity and a dawning trepidation, she ended up going back the way she had come, if only to ease her suspicions and put her mind to rest. As she was passing the admin office again, a shadow caught her eye. Someone was stood by one of the desks in the corner where the lamp was flickering and humming faintly. She peered inside, and sure enough, there was a man stood there, dressed in the standard police uniform. He didn't look up when she entered, but she could see enough of his face to know that she did not recognize him. "Oh, hello," she said, slightly concerned at the fact that she hadn't noticed him before. She stepped further into the room, glancing vaguely around the room to see if there was another door. I didn't realize there was anyone up here. The man said nothing in return. He was staring down at the desk, his features cast in shadow. He kept silent the whole time as though he hadn't noticed her. Thinking he might want to be left alone, the young officer excused herself without saying anything further and slipped back out of the room. However, something urged her to glance back, and she saw with sudden alarm that the man was no longer there. She blinked furiously, rubbing her eyes, but it was clear that there was nobody in the room. At this point, she thought she must be imagining things. It was late and it had been a long shift. It could have been nothing but a hallucination conjured from a tired mind. But it still creeped her out, and she ended up jogging the rest of the way to the locker room, glancing every now and then over her shoulder. She saw nothing else in the night other than a couple of faulty lights in the foyer. Then, a couple of days later, with the incident still on her mind, she noticed a familiar face on the wall of fallen officers. A picture of the same officer she had seen that night was amongst them. That's where I found her, staring at the picture with a look of puzzlement and disconcertment on her face. When I asked her if something was wrong, she pointed to the officer and asked who he was. I explained that he was an officer who had killed himself with his own service weapon a couple of years ago. As I thought about it, I realized it must have been around a similar date as it was then, during the second week of April. When I told her that the officer was dead, she blanched suddenly and explained everything she had seen. I told her that his desk used to be in the corner of the office, exactly where she had seen him standing. Some of the other officers reported getting a bad vibe from the area, and the light on the desk was constantly flickering despite changing the bulb, but nobody had ever seen anything. I assured the officer it was nothing to worry about, but I kept turning the story over in my mind, wondering if what she'd seen was real. I had never gotten a chance to know the officer properly, since our department was large and we didn't work in the same area, but in the few dealings I'd had with him, he'd seemed like a very talented and intelligent individual who had a clear passion for the work he did here. It was a huge shock and a great loss to the department when we found out he had killed himself. None of us ever really saw it coming in the days leading up to it. Now when I'm near the admin offices, I sometimes look out for the flickering lamp or listen out for footsteps that shouldn't be there. On occasion, I think I catch a shadow moving out of the corner of my eye, but I could just be seeing things. I do find it somewhat comforting that he still hangs around his old desk, almost as though he couldn't leave the place behind. Maybe he's watching over us, making sure we all keep out of trouble, or maybe he knows this was the one place he felt happy. Who really knows? Like I said, I thought this was going to be about like 911 phone calls, like literally 911 phone calls, but I guess not. But it's still interesting nonetheless. That was a very good story. It's terrifying and it's very sad, but it was a very good story. So I'm going to keep going with this and we're just going to see if it goes to 911 phone calls because that's what I was really looking forward to. But this story says, The Hill. It must have been nearing 2 in the morning. I was sitting in an unmarked vehicle in the flat of a hill just off the highway, monitoring the early morning traffic. The area was notorious for drivers going 15 to 20 miles per hour over the speed limit because of the long stretch of straight road, so it was a prime spot for flagging down lawbreakers. Despite that, most officers at my department expressed a certain reluctance to sit here. The hill where I was parked had something of a reputation in the local area due to a crime scene almost 26 years previous. The body of a murder victim was discovered on the hill, but the case was never solved due to lack of evidence and a positive identification of the victim. Hyped up by the local media, no doubt, the area was long suspected of being haunted. People reported feeling nauseous or dizzy when hanging around the hill, and even the officers had bought into it, refusing to be stationed here. I didn't really believe in that kind of thing, so it didn't bother me when I was assigned this spot for traffic monitoring. As I was sitting there, keeping an eye on the horizon for any oncoming headlights, something drew my attention. A shadow had just passed across the back of my unit, coming around from the passenger side. I blinked a couple of times, clearing the haze from my eyes from staring into the distance for too long, wondering if I was seeing things. But then I saw the shadow cross over to the driver's side, moving across the front of the vehicle. Other than the pale glimmer of the moon, there were no lights on the highway. The road was shrouded completely in darkness, making it impossible to see if there was anything there that could have cast a shadow. That's when I heard footsteps, too. It was only faint, but it sounded like grass crunching softly beneath someone's shoes, to the left of the vehicle. I squinted through the window, but I couldn't see anything beyond the gloom. Thinking there was somebody outside the car, I started up the ignition and switched on my headlights, casting a dazing glare across the grass in front. When the whole area lit up, I looked out of each window to see who was out there. There was nobody. The shadow had been too large to be an animal, but there was nowhere out here for a person to hide. The hill was completely empty. I began to feel somewhat unsettled by the thought that there might be someone out there, walking around my car. It must have been my imagination that conjured those shadows, but somehow I felt convinced I wasn't alone. Shaking my head, I flicked off my headlights and settled back into my seat. I kept my hazard lights on, casting an eerie red glow around the car, just in case anything was out there. The road itself had gone unusually quiet. Although it was the early hours of the morning, there were usually still cars on the highway at this time, yet I could barely see the glimmer of a high beam in the distance. The wind began to pick up outside, making the unit rock slightly. The grasses on the hill began to sway, creating anomalies in the shadows. I forced myself to keep my eyes on the road, watching the horizon. Unease gnawed at my stomach. Something moved past the car, a shadow darting across my peripheral vision. My heart jumped, and I switched my headlights back on, flooding the hill. There was nobody out there. No movement but the wind rustling through the grass. I decided it was time to leave. There hadn't been a car driving past in some time, and I was starting to spook myself out. There wasn't much point in hanging around anyways, especially since my shift was coming to an end. As I set the car into motion and drove onto the highway, I flicked a glance up to my rearview mirror. For a moment, my blood went cold. It looked as though there was someone standing in the shadow of the hill, watching me drive away. I quickly dragged my eyes back to the road, scolding myself for being silly. I was letting those stories get to me, that was all. I didn't stop feeling uneasy until I reached the next town, where the streets were well lit and there were no more traffic on the road. It was then that something blinked on my dashboard, the security camera. I pulled over to the side of the road and took my camera down from its hook. It must have been recording since I hit my emergency lights, which meant if there had been someone out there on the hill, the camera would have caught it. I rewound the footage to where it began recording and hit play, my heart thumping with nervous anticipation. I hadn't imagined the shadow after all. The video clearly showed a figure walking around the car, starting from the passenger side of the vehicle before moving around to the driver's side. Then, for about half a second after, the entire video went black. It was almost as though somebody had put their finger over the lens, smudging the visual. After that, it went back to normal, and there was no longer a shadow in view. I wound the tape forward a few more times, but the shadowy figure didn't return. I set down the camera, unease settling in the pit of my stomach as I wondered what it could have been. The shadow had no visual features, nothing to suggest it was a person, but what else could it have been? I tried not to dwell on it as I drove back to the station. Maybe I just needed some rest and the whole thing would seem silly in the morning. Nevertheless, the next time I was asked to go to the hill to monitor traffic, I refused. I would also refuse. I would never go back there ever again. And like alone, oh my god, I thought police had like partners and you're like just alone up there. I guess sometimes they are alone if they're just like monitoring traffic, but I'd be like, can I take somebody with me if I really have to go? Okay, and this next story says, alarming. As a police officer, I often blame a particularly busy or crazy night on a full moon or some other natural event that old wives will swear invoke abnormal behavior. Don't get me started on Halloween, just the whole month of October in general. I'm not even gonna go there. Truthfully, I never put much stock in old superstitions, but it helps combat the struggle of dealing with chaos on those nights when it seems the world has lost its mind. A lighthearted twist on human behavior, if you will. But as far as wholeheartedly trusting in the supernatural, no, that was not me. Not until one night in late June. My partner and I were 7 hours into a 12-hour shift, sitting in the cruiser and finishing another chilled cup of bad coffee. It had been an uneventful evening. I couldn't tell you why, but I vividly remember looking up into the sky and thinking how empty it was. You live or work in the city long enough, you get used to the starless nights, but there were no clouds, no fog, and no moon. Just an empty black expanse of sky. Anyways, I don't know why I remember this in such great detail, but I do, and it unexplainably gives me the creeps even still. We were in an area of development that night. New buildings and refurbished buildings were all up and down the street. Construction was everywhere, which meant vandalism in the area was likely and happened often. We had just finished what passed for coffee and a meal when dispatch sent out an alert. One of those remote security companies had called 911, alerting police that an alarm, possibly an intruder, had been set off in the upper levels of a nearby office building. We were about a block away. We let dispatch know we would be responding to the call. Copy that, officer. I will let the caller know a unit is responding. Dispatch clicked off. On our way, my partner spoke into the radio. Officers, the caller has informed you they are contacting a key holder. Please wait for the key holder's access before entering premises. Dispatch clicked off once more, and my partner radioed a quick response of acknowledgement. I sure hope the intruder waited for the key holder before heading inside. My partner rolled his eyes. Oh, I'm sure they did. Everyone knows manners first and all that. The deadpan that night was heavy in the air. It had been an incredibly quiet and slow shift. Arriving at the given address, we got out of the cruiser and assessed quickly that there didn't seem to be any obvious signs of a break-in. The refurbished building, according to what I had heard and what the offices listed on the newly installed sign, said it housed mostly doctors' offices and a pharmacy. According to the information we had been told, the alarm had been triggered in one of the empty offices upstairs. We both continued to look around the building as we waited for the key holder to arrive. Inside the building was completely dark. There did not appear to be any lights on inside at all. We walked around the building and never saw any signs of a break-in or a disturbance of any sort. Coming back around to the front of the building, there was a man waiting by the front door. He was of average height, looked to be middle-aged with thick, graying chestnut hair that had been parted to the side and a neatly trimmed beard. He had brown, forgettable eyes and wore slacks and a dark button-up shirt. He seemed to be the kind of guy anyone could describe, and yet so memorable as to be utterly unrecognizable. He could have been anyone, anywhere. He was friendly enough, however, especially given the late hour. He held a key ring in his right hand and waved to us as we walked up to him with his left. "Good evening, sir." My partner and I both greeted him. "Good evening, officers." Without further prompting, he turned and unlocked the office building doors. He strode over to a switch behind the reception desk and flipped on a few of the lobby lights. The alarm was triggered on the top floor. The empty office is up there. He leaned against the desk. To the left was an elevator and to the right was stairs. We first opted to take the stairs, but the door marking them as such was locked. "Do you mind opening this up for us, please, sir?" I asked the man. He continued to lean against the desk. He hadn't moved since he parked himself there. "Don't have the key to that door. The elevator should work," he said, his back to us. I looked at my partner to confirm that that was strange. Judging by the questioning look on his face, he agreed. We walked around to the other side of the desk and hit the up arrow. The elevator dinged and opened immediately. I glanced over at the man. He was still standing there staring out the front windows as though he was lost in thought and completely alone. Weird. Inside the elevator, I began to get a weird feeling, but I chalked it up to too much caffeine in the interaction with the key holder. Doesn't seem like this is turning into anything at all. Probably just a fault in the security system, or a mouse. My partner is not a small man. In fact, the last time he was described as small was likely when he was in kindergarten. He spends his free time at the gym and is all around just a scary-looking dude. He's a great officer, though, and I've always appreciated him having my back. While a nice reprieve from the chaos, calls like this were boring and not what he wanted to be doing. Probably, but we still have to check it out. You never know. The elevator dinged open to reveal another waiting room lobby area. The top floor was completely dark except for a minuscule amount of light coming from the only hallway. At first I thought it was just a light coming from the window at the end, but it couldn't have been that. There was no moon. We pulled the issued flashlights from our belts and began to do a more thorough search. The waiting room was obviously empty. There was not much to it. Several chairs lined the walls, and 2 coffee tables sat off-center. The reception desk was empty of anything and everything. This floor did not appear to be currently in use. We cautiously walked to the darkened hall where all the exam room and offices were located. There was a single flickering overhead light fading in and out of clarity at the very end of the hallway. Every horror film I'd ever seen came to mind as I looked at that light. My partner, unlike his usual sarcastic self, said nothing as we proceeded down the hall to the first door in the hallway. I checked the knob and found it locked. My partner checked the door directly across from the door I checked. He found it locked as well. 2 doors down, 6 more to go. We methodically checked each door, and each time, we found it to be locked. The last door to be checked was at the very end of the hall and sketchily illuminated by the ever-flickering overhead light. My heart was pounding in my chest, and irrational fear had settled into my nerves. My partner checked on this last door and expected it to be locked the same as the others, but that was not the case. The knob twisted down and released its hold on the jamb, silently gliding into the dark room. Steeling ourselves for confrontation, we took a deep calming breath and entered the room. We examined the room with our flashlights carefully and scrupulously, taking in the details of the abandoned office. I don't know what that word is. A simple wooden desk sat directly in front of the shut and locked windows. A calendar from several years ago was still under the protective glass that covered the desktop. A jar of black pens sat on the corner, and a half-used notepad was resting in front of the jar. A tall metal file cabinet was placed in the 2 back corners of the office. 2 doors were side by side to the right of the office. In one, we found nothing. It appeared to be a small coat closet. In the other was a bathroom. Again, nothing in there aside from the toilet and the sink. The office didn't yield any signs of an intruder or that anyone had been in there for years. Can you see anything that would indicate why the alarm was triggered? I asked my partner. No, let's get out of here. It was probably a glitch or something in the system. He was already heading for the door. I followed right behind him and almost plowed into his huge frame as he dead stopped in the doorway. The ever-flickering light was no more. It had gone completely out, but the light above the elevator shone bright and steady. Across from the door we stood in was another door, a door that had been locked tight just a moment before, a door that was now wide open. I heard the swallowed fear as my partner gulped and stepped into the hall. I was right on his heels. I stepped around to stand beside him and was immediately met with an unnerving sight. Each and every door we had just checked and found to be locked was standing open. Every single one. At this point, training overrode fear and nerves. We began to check inside each of the now open doors. These were doors to exam rooms. Each one was empty. Not even the exam beds were left inside. We left the doors as we found them, open. The last door standing open was to another office. This one was empty. No personal bathroom or closet, just an empty desk. Still, we walked inside to be sure. The moment we were both inside the office, our radios blasted a high-pitched, ear-piercing static that drove us to our knees. In the hall, we heard a door slam shut with such force I was sure it would have splintered. I can't tell you who was out the door first, but my partner's long legs got into the elevator first. The doors dinged and opened on the first push of the call button. We were inside and hurriedly pushing the doors close and lobby button. In the lobby, the elevator let us out without incident. Where is the key holder? I have some questions for him. My partner was not having this experience. He was clearly shaken. I know I was too. The key holder was nowhere to be seen. We walked outside to see if he had stepped out, but he seemed to have vanished. He just left us here? What is going on with this place? I wondered out loud, needing to hear something, even if it was my own voice. I'll contact dispatch, explain what's going on, and get the number to the key holder. He did that, and I listened to the exchange between him and dispatch. I grew increasingly more uneasy. Officer, the key holder should be arriving in 5 to 10 minutes. The security company had difficulties contacting the key holder on call. The woman at dispatch was clearly annoyed. She probably thought she was being pranked. Dispatch, we have been inside for over 20 minutes. We were just with the guy. My partner was struggling to keep the calm in his voice. That's impossible, officer. I'm telling you, the key holder was only reached a few minutes ago. They're still en route to the building. Dispatch clicked off, leaving radio silence. We decided to continue waiting outside for the en route key holder. A few minutes later, a small dark blue car pulled into the parking spot immediately behind our cruiser. It shut off, and out of the driver's door stepped out a young woman. She was dressed in jeans and a hoodie and looked like she had just rolled out of bed, clearly bothered to be up and out this late. Good evening, officers. Sorry about the wait, she said as she came towards us holding a big, round key ring. Good evening, ma'am. Another key holder already let us inside. We didn't see any signs of intrusion, tampering, or vandalism, but it does seem like there could be a glitch or a malfunction in the system. I explained as she came to a stop in front of where we stood. What? I'm the only one on call, and I'm the only one with the building keys right now. She was obviously confused and a little frustrated. A man met us here about 30 minutes ago. I went on to describe how he looked and how he left without saying anything. The more I explained, the more blood drained from her face. He sounds a lot like... She paused and looked around uncomfortably. He sounds a lot like one of the doctors who had worked here several years ago. I had just started, but I remember him because he committed suicide. Again, she paused, this time crossing her arms and took a ragged breath. He jumped out of his office window. Chills shot up my spine. Judging by my partner's reaction, I think the same must have been happening to him too. Neither of us ever told anyone about that call. There was no explanation immediately at my disposal, scientific or superstitious. Supernatural, maybe. but I can't bring myself to dive too deeply into that realm of possibility. That one is horrible. That one is terrifying. I did not like that one. I did not like that one at all. I really didn't. Oh my god, can you imagine, like, oh my god, just checking a room. Oh my god, okay. Can you imagine checking tons of doors, I don't know how many doors there were, checking 10 doors, all of them being locked, going into a room for like 5 minutes, coming back out, and every single door just being open. No. No, I wasn't planning on being a cop, but never in my life will I become a cop. I can't handle that shit. So these stories aren't 911 phone calls, they are more police ghost stories, but I feel like these ones are a lot better than the other ones I was reading, so I'm kind of down to keep reading from this. If you guys are down, it's up to you. It's all up to you. I do want to try to find 911 phone calls because I think that would be really interesting to read. So I will still try to find a book on that, but until then, we're going to keep reading from this, and I still have like the Ouija board stories and the Let's Not Meet and the paranormal, and I have all that stuff. In the TikTok videos, I got all that. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Something a little new, but not new at the same time because I was already reading police ghost stories, but it's kind of new because it's a new book. I have to sneeze really bad. I'm gonna go so I can take my puppies out and hang out with my cats and my dogs. I'll find my animals. Oh, by the way, today is John and I's 2-year anniversary. I'm filming this on Tuesday. You're seeing this on Friday. It's our 2-year anniversary. Very exciting, very exciting. And I was just thinking, we've been together for 2 years and we've accumulated 5 animals. 5. What the fuck? But okay, I'm gonna go. I love you guys. I will see you in the next one. Bye. Also, look how cool my shirt is. It says, I've always been a sucker for a man in uniform, and it's like the Grim Reaper. Get it? I got this on Wicked Clothes. It's like I think it's like a small business, wickedclothes.com. It's a small business. Support small businesses. They have a lot of really cool shirts. They have some that are a little creepy for me, some things that I don't vibe with, but they do have a lot of really cool t-shirts. They have one that says Halloween is a state of mind, and it's like a skull with like Halloween in its head. I don't know, but I think I might buy it. I decided that even though it's, well, actually, technically it's September when I'm uploading this video. It's August 31st when I'm filming it, but it's technically September when I'm uploading it. It's time for the Halloween sweaters to come out. I got a lot of Halloween sweaters, and they're coming out because it's spooky season. Spooky season. Spooky season all year. How about that? But yeah, okay, I'm gonna go. I don't know what I'm rambling about, and I still have to sneeze. I haven't done that yet, but I'm gonna go. See ya.